Well, hello everyone, I'm Dell, and it is a rainy Thursday in October 2021, and I'm just enjoying myself today. Of course, the weather detecting technology I'm sporting here does tell me we have some high humidity, and I have the choice to either be productive in the house and get some well-deserved cleaning done, or I can goof off on the computer. And so I was playing early this morning and doing a little bit of just look arounds. And on the subject of radon, I've come up with some tabs I'd like to share with you in this entertaining film. Now, I say entertaining because the purpose of this film is not to instruct, but to entertain. There is no warranty, either written or implied, and none shall be inferred. And I am not, nor the producers of the film are subject matter experts. So with this told you, if you want to watch, hang around and see where we go from here. Okay, I've got my browser open, use Google as my search engine, and I use Chrome as the actual thing I use. And I have up at the top some of these things that I've already looked at. I said, I need to keep that up here to make my point, and I've kept them up there. Now, I don't know that I'm even going to produce this video to finalize it, and if I do, it may be held private. I may publicize it. I don't know how you might get it, but I don't necessarily know that I'm going to have a description where I can put all of these individual little tabs in it. I'll try to tell you where they come from. I'll give you that verbally, and you will see it up here in the URL beam, up here at the little slot, the beam, if you want to then pause one and look it up. So again, these are just stuff I pulled up this morning, not before this morning, and certainly not after this morning, because we haven't gotten to the future yet. So let's take a look. Well, now we've got this first tab up. It is radon and pathogens. This is a progeny. It is. Now we've got a tab open, the first tab I was going to look at, and I'm looking at the NIH. National Library of Medicine. The date on this is from the Health and Physics is 2019 of October, and there's the publication if you want to stop and look, see what that is. Here's the title: Radon and Progeny, if I said that right, detection using tensioned metastable fluid detectors. Well, aren't we glad we drank our coffee this morning? Now, I do want to pull this up, and you can see up there in the beam, the upper tab, or what do you want to call this space? I call it a beam because it goes from post to post. But we're going to pull this up and look at something here. In the abstract, it gives us a number that we're probably going to see later in this video. And it says radon and other alpha-emitting nucleotides in air can be a significant risk for health hazards in the workplace and dwellings. Radon gas in the U.S. homes causes over 21,000 deaths from lung cancer annually, according to the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, the U.S. EPA. So right here we're hitting two federal government sources, the EPA and NIH, which of course comes out of, I guess, the CDC. But we're just going to look at that number, that 21,000 deaths. That's important. And you'll notice that there's not 21,001 and 2. So there's a little bit of impression that we can get when we round off to the 1,000. We can assume that the most significant digits are these two right here. And we're not going to get really worried in this video about the last three digits of any number we're looking at. We can use them perhaps, but it's just not going to make us nuts. So our next little tab we're going to look at is from the CDC. And I have it prefigured here. Let's roll it up at the top so you can see it. CDC, and there is the CDC NCHS, fast stacks, whatever. So I just want to look, well, what is the incidence of death and mortality for the United States in any given year? And here it tells us there are about 3 million deaths a year, and that's from all causes. And we're going to do a little bit of some math right in this because we have some convenient numbers. Now, you remember what that number was we just looked at according to the previous tab. Let's click it. 21,000 deaths. Radon gas in America has caused, it believes, 21,000 deaths from lung cancer. So let's go back. 21,000. That's our number we're going to use in the numerator in most of these calculations. Well, I did do a little bit of prep work for you, and I have some numbers here, and in this space to the side I'll put a table up in post-production with these numbers, but I'm just going to read them roughly off of my notes. Well, according to the CDC, which relieves, or according to the CDC, which relies on the EPA's estimate, there's 21,000. So we have a population of about 300 million. We'll look at that in the next tab. So let's just keep it with these two pages at 3 million deaths a year approximate. So if I take 21,000 deaths a year and put that over the 2855, again, we're going to look at those. We come up with a ratio of about 0.7%. So of all of the deaths, just using these numbers, in the United States, only 0.7%, it would seem, according to the United States government from these sources, would be attributable to lung cancers from radon. Well, let's look at some other numbers to put some perspective on it. Okay, well, let's go up here and look at the heart disease. Well, I did my figures, and if I got them right, you can verify them at your leisure. Heart disease then is responsible for 23% of the deaths in America. Heart disease. So we are already comparing 0.7% to 23% for heart disease. Are we getting our exercise? Are we eating right? Cancer, all cancers, 21%. Accidents, 6%. That's almost 10 times the number of deaths from accidents that we would have from radon caused lung cancer. We also had lower respiratory that causes it 5.5%. And if we go all the way down to diabetes at 3.1%, pneumonia at 1.8%, which is more than twice that of radon. And even we find that people who self-harm or self-terminate, you be gentle in your mind of how to phrase that, but they list it down here as intentional self-harm, suicide. That works out to 1.7%, still more than double the risk of death from radon. Okay, well, let's look at one other perspective number that we can put it on. We'll change the denominator. If this is our U.S. population, and it's 330 million, give or take 500,000 people, 330 million, when we look at that as the number, and this 21,000 from the EPA and as reproduced here with the NIH, we're going to look at this as being able to be responsible for if I did the math right, you check the math yourself, 0.006% of the population of the United States would die annually from radon. And I'm not putting that down by any means. That's not my point on this. I'm just trying to put some perspective, because sometimes people will pick and choose how they present numbers. And I'm not a big fan of people who would manipulate numbers for some reason or agenda or another. Radon is important, but there might be in your life more significant factors that you need to worry about. So why don't we look at some of the other things? Let's look at what Tennessee has to offer. And these are factors that you can look at, information that I didn't make up. They're publicly given to us through the World Wide Web, or the internet, actually, to be more specific, the internet. And so we'll look at those. And let's look at this tab right here, the Tennessee map. Now I have an interactive map that I'll show you where it came from in just a second. I will say that it comes from a reliable source, I believe, and it's an interactive map. Anybody in the state of Tennessee doing research for making a decision whether or not they want to radon test their home is available to them. This is not a Dell thing. It's a find it for yourself thing. Now here's the interactive map. I happen to live in this county here. It's a yellow, it's not the green, it's not the red, so I'm going to guess it's somewhere in between. So why don't we look at what the numbers are here. Rutherford County, it says we had 342 tests in the county. That's not a huge sample, but of those 342 tests, the average radon level was 2.7, and we're looking for what, 4? I think we are, yes. And the median, which is the most, this very center value of those, is 1.6. That's significantly below a concern level, or the threshold level of action, however the industry calls it. And the maximum level looks like it's going to be 24, significantly above, and the minimum at 0.3. So nobody, doesn't look like we've tested 0 anywhere in this county. But we can hit a hot zone. Let's go over to East Tennessee. Pick this county. Happens to be Greene County. Beautiful county, by the way, if you want to go up there. I think the General Morgan Inn is still going on up there. You need to stop in and check them out. Very nice little location. Anyway, Greene County had 205 tests, which is not quite as many as we had in Rutherford. But you see its average level is 5, which would put it over that, quote, 4 that we're looking for. Let's go to a Greene County. That was Greene County. Let's go find us a greener county. Let's go down to Shelby. It says that there are only 142 tests in all of Shelby County that they have recorded. Now, that doesn't seem like a lot for the population of Shelby County. And we see the average radon level that they have is 1.6, significantly below the 4. Again, I'm not an expert, not claiming to be. I have no subject matter expertise. My responsibilities and anything that I might have to do, like say in real estate, would be limited to telling you when your inspection period starts and when it ends, and for you to get all of your inspection you deem possible and necessary to get done in that time frame. Now, like I said, Rutherford County, it's below a concern level for me. Doesn't mean I don't want to check it, but we can see already in Rutherford County we have roughly 350 or so we're about twice what Shelby County has. It's up to an individual to check if they want to and to see what they want to do about it. So where did this map come from? Well, I'm coming from the Tennessee Department of Health over here. And we're going to slide down to the radon, and there we have that map. So you should be able to find this map if you want to look for it. Now, I want to use this to bring up, to highlight this number. 21,000, we saw that a while ago according to the EPA. And they don't even tell us where they get the number from. I told you where we got the number from because they pulled it from the NIH, and they say it comes from the EPA. So it's saying we have 21,000 lung cancer deaths every year from the radon gas. But I want you to notice this number to keep things in perspective. Do you see that number? About 2,900 of these deaths occur in people who have never smoked. To me, I'm looking at this paragraph and I'm asking myself questions as I try to prioritize for my own self. Apparently, 21,000 people die nationally each year, according to Radon, but only 2,900, which is a little more than 10%, right? So it's significantly smaller. Did I do that calculation on my pad? Well, let's take a look. Yes, that would work out to, if we were to look at the numbers, 0.1% of the deaths that occurred in the United States in a given year, 0.1% of those that would have succumbed to radon-related lung injury and death would be 0.1% of those if you were a non-smoker. We already saw that it was 0.7 or 0.7% if you, of all of the people, but if you're not smoking, it's only 0.1% of those deaths are attributable to radon. Is that not what it's saying? Now let's look at something else. I've got another point here I want to make up because people sometimes might wonder, well, Now, what should I do? Tell me what I should do about my test. And what did I tell you? So I will never tell anybody, give them advice about a test, short of saying, my responsibility begins to tell you and ends at this is your inspection period on this date, and your inspection period ends on this date, and all of your inspections must be done during that time frame if you have not waived inspections. Okay? That is the limit of my responsibility. I don't teach class on radon. I'm not a subject matter expert, and I've told you that at the first of this. But let's look back at the National Institutes of Health. This is coming from whatever the NCBI, and we're going to pull this up because it's going to bring an important point I want you to consider. If you are concerned about radon in your home, and you should be, till you have some better information, because if you don't know, you don't know. But here's some of the things to look for. In my mind, I'm thinking 3 grand divisions of single-family homes. We have homes on slabs, which are like a garage, okay, or some commercial properties are on slabs, okay, slab concrete. Then we have crawl space houses, which is my preferred home. That's what I buy, and that's what I'm living in. My forever home is a crawl space house. And there are also basement houses. Now, radon is a gas that is a little heavier than air, and it tends to settle down. But it's never the same really day to day, hour to hour, month to month, year to year. It changes over time. There's a lot of factors that do this. We're not sure everything, but some things are suspected, such as a heavy rain might cause more radon. We're limestone in Middle Tennessee, where I'm from. You notice we didn't have that much radon in Memphis. They're pretty well much kind of in that Mississippi sand over there on the west. And in East Tennessee, we've got a lot of protruding mountains. So if the radioactive gas is coming through the rock, it feels rather natural in my untrained mind that we might be a little hotter in East Tennessee, a little cooler in West Tennessee. And as always, Middle Tennessee is just right. So I'm looking at this. I know if I'm heavier than air, that if I have water filling up my aquifer from a heavy rain, perhaps I'm pushing gas out from the earth up. And if I have a crawl space house, it can collect there. Now, if I have a properly ventilated crawl space house, there's a good chance in my untrained mind, my non-expert trained mind, that we're going to probably keep it from ever building up in the bottom underneath my floor system. Okay? I'm not living in the crawl space. I'm living in the living areas. So that's a big issue. This article is talking about the short term versus the long term of testing for radon. And it's kind of pointing out the real weakness about a short term number. Because remember, if you were, I'm not saying anything specific, but if you were considering buying a home, you have a very narrow window in which to take your test. Okay? You've got a very, very narrow window to take your test, and a very narrow window to request any kind of repairs if you want to. Now, this is just an environmental hazard. It's part of Tennessee and in the world, and you've got a very short period of time. I bring this up because I did want to talk about something. The basement. This is a basement. I would rather expect a basement to be a little hotter as an area, because it is both it can be both a living space, not necessarily, but it could be a living space, but it's also at lowest level, and the gas being heavier is going to settle in that area. Maybe not so much in a slab, and maybe not so much in a properly ventilated crawl space home. These are all factors that I'm not an expert in. I don't necessarily own a property that somebody might be looking into. But it's also a short-term test. Now, what this is going to talk about in the abstract is, down here, the primary objective of this study was to investigate the temporal variability between basement winter short-term 7 to 10 days and a basement annual radon measurements. Okay? So anytime if you're really worried about something, realize that even a flawless test taken once a year over a 3-day period, a 3 to 4 day period, is probably not going to give you a full picture of the whole elephant. You remember the elephant and the blind men? One took him by the ear and said, well, an elephant feels like a big heavy leaf, and one grabbed him by the tail and he feels like a rope, and one of them got him by the leg and he feels like a tree. Another one hit him on the side and felt like a big furry wall. And that's because it's not a complete picture, and you're not going to, by the little signs we're looking at, you're not going to get a complete picture based upon any fragment or snapshot in time. Okay, now I think you'll find that things may be a little more heavy in the winter time than the summertime for a lot of different reasons. Well, we tend to shut ourselves in our homes during that period of time. How many people are in your home? Was the home open and ventilated and people coming in and out keeping that gas from building up? Should it even be present? The other issue, people say, well, you bring the heat on. Well, for most of us, we have central heat in Tennessee as well as central air. And if your ducts are in your crawl space or under your slab, wherever they are, they don't move season to season. So one of the reasons it may be a little bit heavier in measurement in the winter, one of the theories I've heard people talk about, not a subject matter expert, is that we lock our windows and we keep ourselves shut in more. And as we pull air through our system, if we've got any leakages, they may actually enter our home during that period. Again, with a crawl space home, a lot of us in Tennessee will close off our crawl space, which affects our ventilation. So we might very well expect some seasonality just using man looking at the internet logic that is not going to be the same, and that a representative sample taken over a 3 or 4 day period is not going to really give you much confidence that that is a annualized issue. Now, why would I mention annualized? Well, from what I can gather, radon's risk are cumulative over a long period of time. They cause a chronic illness over a long period of exposure. And so you might walk in a little high, may walk in a little low, and we're looking at that average. And again, we need to have good data. So it's going to continue to talk about other objectives were to test the short-term measurements diagnostic preference or performance at 2 reference levels and to evaluate its ability to predict the annual average basement radon concentration. It's kind of what I'm banging on the bell here. And what it comes around and says is it failed. The single point test failed to prove reliable. It may be a reliable test at the time it was taken, but as far as to be a predictive for the annualized exposure, it's not very good. In fact, there are standards that would require a full year test anyway, over a period, or at least a 4-period test, if not less than that. Overall geometry of the short-term radon test, and they give you some numbers that are gobbledygook to us non-trained professionals, but we can read what it says down here at the bottom. The findings from this study provide evidence from a substantially lower likelihood of obtaining false negative results from a single short-term test in a region of high indoor radon potential level. Okay, what did I just show you when we looked at the Radon Tennessee map? These are something that might come to your mind. This might be a bigger issue if you're in a red county than if you are in a green county or a yellow county. It's up to you. You're an adult, make your own decision. But we also find out that a short-term test, the gist of this that I take, is not a big deal. It's not gospel, and radon's risk are a long-term exposure type of issue, not a peak here now and then type of thing. There are some standards that talk about how long it's above a certain level, and they factor in, which brings me to my next tab. This one is a vendor's paper. I assume it's a vendor. It is at radiolect.com, and I pulled it up because I'm going to talk about some of the methodologies of measurement in just a second. Again, this is not subject matter expert, just a man avoiding cleaning his house on a rainy Thursday. And we're going to pull this down because they have two little charts I want to point to. If I look at this one up at the top, Table 1, it talks about radon detectors used in the intercomparison. And if you check it out, A happens to be, the good one here, we're going to see in a second, happens to be electric ion chambers obtained from Rad Electric Incorporated. Rad Electric. I'm thinking that this is put out because they're going to suggest that their equipment is substantially better and more accurate than whatever else people are putting out there. So we're going to look at that because that's another question you have. Would you lose your mind over one sample over a 3-day or 4-day period that might seem to be a little high versus one when you don't even know the error or accuracy rate of the equipment or the tests that are being done? Okay, and remember, if you are looking on a transaction of a home, you have a narrow period. You don't have a 12-month period to study to find out if this is a problem for you. You've got a little wavy window. That's what you have to work with. So let's slide on down to Table 2, which is the one I'm bringing up to look at. It says Company A, number detectors 4, and it's got a lot in the garbage that we don't know because we're not subject matter experts. But here's one that's important. This right here, this footnoted, and it's footnoted with an H. And we see 4.9%, 9.1%, 4%, 27, 19, 21, 14, 30%. And when we read what the H is, the footnote H is it says the mean of the absolute value of the relative errors. So again, how you choose to interpret an overage in a short-term single-point test for radon, when we don't necessarily know that we're having a representative environment inside of the home that's going to be representative of you living, I would be willing to bet if I had 2 kids and a wife else running in and out of my house constantly, that even if I had the same exposure rate, it may not be the same as if I'm single dell in the home that doesn't go in and out quite as much. You see, there's so much that could affect this. That's one of the reasons I believe it is recommended you do an annual test, a multi-point annual test spanning all of the seasons. So let's look at our next tab. This is one of the 2 standards that people seem to refer to when looking online. The NRSB, and you can see their address up here. It's very cryptic at nrsb.org, and I'm going to bet they're going to have a certain bias based upon their knowledge and experience, and they're on the National Radon Safety Board. They also certify testers and people. You can see, find a certified professional. That's their certification, but they're not the only game in town. We also have the NRPP, also with a very cryptic webpage, nrpp.info, and they are the National Radon Proficiency Program. I believe these test to an ANSI standard. Yes, I believe, yes. NRPP test to an ANSI standard. I don't know that the NRSB does because what? I am not a subject matter expert. All I'm doing is the same thing you can do and you should do if you're looking for this kind of environmental question to be answered. I don't know. I'm not living in the home. I'm not purchasing a home. It's going to be what it is. Now, I do want to take you back to what I did because you might think, well, Dale, you sound like you're not all that concerned. Well, that's not really true. I am concerned, but I like to have I like to have a better understanding of it. I don't want to take a snapshot. Have you ever looked at a whole picture of yourself during Thanksgiving or whatever, and they take it right when you've got a fork in your face? All right, that's just a snapshot in time. It may not be representative of you over the entire year that year. Well, that's kind of what we have when we have that very narrow window. You might want to consider, if you want to make a decision that affects your long-term health potentially, in a 3 or 4 day test taken once. Now, if you had unfathomable numbers that came out of it, you certainly would want to retest. But even if you got very low numbers, I still would think that you would want to test. I just think you would want to maybe do a short test at some point in time to figure if you might need to consider it in the future. But again, radon exposure appears to be a long-term exposure risk, not an instantaneous. If I step out in front of a bus, that's an instantaneous hazard. If I'm eating too much or smoking too much or not exercising enough, any number of things, those things may eventually catch me, but they're not necessarily going to catch me today. So I want to go back to the Tennessee radon site where we looked at this, and I'm also going to since we just hit it, I want to reiterate this: 21,000 lung cancer deaths a year out of a country of 330 million people. We also want to look at this number. About 2,900 of those occur in people who don't smoke. So if radon is the prevailing cause of lung cancers, I'm kind of curious to know why there's this big disparity, that it happens so much more in smokers than non-smokers. That could be just a generalized lung health. I don't know. Let's look at that tab again. So here we are back at the state of Tennessee's page, and here are the numbers: 21,000 lung cancers and 2,900 in non-smokers. It's there in black and white for you to see. So you take that for what it's worth, and it has a lot of good information. How does it enter the 4 test and all the 4 parts? But look down here at this paragraph. This is kind of, I find, a little bit alarmist in a respect, because it says, I tested my home and the radon level was over 4. What can I do? Okay, it says if the results in your radon test were over 4, TDEC, Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation, and the EPA recommend. Nobody's requiring anything. If it's it would seem to me, if it's a super guaranteed life taker, that we would have some requirements, not just suggestions or recommendations. But at 4, and I'm not going to try that picoliters or whatever it is, pico parts per the radius, the number. Again, not a subject matter expert. I'm stressing that on purpose. It says the follow-up test should be conducted, and that's kind of common sense. If you were to take a snapshot in time and it was over that amount, I would think that you might want to recheck it in those other times of year to find out, is it a fluke? Is it maybe a tester that's not calibrated, that's got a 30% error? We don't know these things, but we can look into them, I think. So that's another thing I'm looking at. Now, when I also come down here, we find out that we have some ways that we can do new construction to avoid it. We can remediate it. What are the standards? But I want to come up to this tab, if I can find it. And it's on TDEC's page, not the Department of Health. So here we have it. We have at Tennessee.gov the radon program test kits. Each year TDEC gives thousands of tests to test their own home. Click here to get yours while they last. Now you'll notice the time frame. Please allow 6 to 8 weeks, but it's free. And it's the old school, what I call hot pocket test. You can watch this video, but what it will tell you is you work your little test, you hang it in a space, in a prescribed space, tell them how long it was open and exposed, and they give you back an average. I prefer this type of test. Why? Because I'm not going to likely see spikes that tend to make me frightened that I might see with an electronic tester, right? Because you might see some spikes, but remember, radon is apparently a long-term exposure list of an average value. This by nature takes an average value over a period of time, and it's free. And if it's not free, it's only like 40 bucks. Available at places like Home Depot and such like that. So it's not overly worried. Now here I want to point this out because I want to go back to the numbers. A percentage of tests that test over 4 in Tennessee over this period of 5 years was 26%. Okay, I was thinking it was 23, so I stand corrected already. But that's 1 in 4. So by this would seem to suggest a 1 in 4 chance that you're going to test positive over that. But that's a little bit misleading as well, because if you test and you don't break 4, you're less likely to retest, I would think, and test after that, and test after that. So you can look at this, and we certainly know that the rate of lung cancer in the state of Tennessee is not 1 in every 4 people. So I think we can go for that. So overall, there are issues such as, what do I do if I have radon in my home? Well, you're an adult. You can choose to have it mitigated or not. You can wait a while and have it retested to see if it's a seasonal thing, see how often it is, what the actual levels are. If they're extremely high, I certainly would probably work on that to get that done, but maybe they're a little low and you only had 1 bad test. And if we see some of these electronic testers, if we go back to the sun field, we see a ratio on some of these things in the 20 and 30%. So right at that threshold level, I don't know, that action level, I don't know that I would absolutely lose my mind over that were it me. But I don't give advice because I'm not a subject matter expert in radon. So, like I said, I'm just a guy here, raining in Tennessee on a Thursday, and I thought, what can I do that might be fun? And I got poking around on the internet, and this information is available to anyone and everyone. And if you're ever thinking about potentially making a purchase or sale, you have things this to worry about, because chronic long-term exposure is apparently the issue. So if you're not planning on staying in a home couple of 7 years or 12 years, I think the average is getting on up to toward 12 years. The longer you plan on being at home, the more significant it is. Now, I am told from all of the interweb stuff that it's not that expensive to fix. The thing is, you just need to know if you have an issue or not. And what I can determine from the experts is a single point test is highly inaccurate. It's subject, depending on any of the variabilities that we would see over a year, and it's the average annual exposure that raises our risks. And according to the old numbers here in the book that I just figured out, if you're a non-smoker, the chances that you will die of radon is 0.1% annually. So I don't know. I'm not an expert. Did I mention that enough in this video? I'm not a subject matter expert. I'm just showing you what one man or woman can do on a rainy day sitting in front of their computer. So I hope that's been helpful to you, or entertaining, I should say, not helpful. I hope it's entertaining to you, and that you have a blessed day.